A couple of comments on Seeds of Permaculture. It's a documentary about Pranya project, which is a permaculture project in northern Thailand. And let's see what's going on in Pranya.
One of the most important aspects to our ecological farm here is the making of compost, about improving the soil and constantly bringing more organic matter and more life into the soil. The compost production process is actually really easy and it's accessible to anyone. It doesn't take expensive parts, it doesn't take that much space. All you need are 3 simple ingredients. So using corn husks as our brown matter. Then we need green matter. You're looking for green leafy matter. The green color in the leaf indicates that there's still quite a bit of nitrogen left in it. If I was to leave this out in the sun, after a couple days it would turn brown, and that's indicating that the nitrogen has been lost into the atmosphere. So we want to cut it fresh, use it fresh in our compost pile. We just had a bunch of weeds around our farm, and this morning we went out and collected them up and put them in a big pile. And as we add it to the compost pile, we're going to chop it into little bits. We also have a bunch of food scraps from the kitchen that we're going to layer into the pile as well, and that also is considered part of our green component. For the nitrogen component of the compost pile, generally we use manure in the pile. You can get away with using the greens from legume plants because they're also high in nitrogen. But we're going to use, in our local area, there's lots of cows around, so we just went to some local farmers and got their manure from them. And so we're just using some manure out of their cow yards. So we'll layer this in along with the green and the brown and add moisture and oxygen, and that'll make our compost pile. Another important component to our compost pile is an inoculum of microorganisms from the previous compost pile. 40% brown matter, 40% green matter, and 20% high nitrogen.
Compost, very important if you want to restore the soil. I was already scarred for life when I was younger, or actually for the recent years. My mother disliked compost because it's not nice in her garden, and it's like when your mother does something, it can like put an idea into your brain, and I think it can. Some of the ideas mothers have can really hurt their children, and it's something that mothers need to think about. But composting is very, 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 very important, very good for soil quality and restoring soil, and also plant growth. So if you have very nice soil, you need very nice soil to have plants growing. You can water it and you can have sunshine, but it will not grow. I have plants here at the Lek and Greg Vegan Camp that are like not growing at all because the soil is not so good yet. But I think we'll restore it soon. And the thing is that I don't prioritize to use a lot of time on doing compost, correct compost, the right temperature, thermometers and stuff like that. If I had a thermometer, I would also probably like build a facility to make humanure, where you use your own stool to make fertilizer. But it can be a tricky process. Also, if you want people to visit, you don't want really to have a potential disease coming into the soil. So the way we're currently doing it is that if we have some of our food waste, it's not waste, it's just like food scraps. I'll just dig it down into the soil not to lose the nitrogen that might be in some of the green matter. And also to keep, if we have like a compost, chicken will probably come and eat it or something, and it will just be a mess probably. So there are different things, just keeping it simple, just throwing it under the hay or digging it a bit under the soil to keep some nutrients for the plants.
It's pretty interesting to see the landscape here because it's a very good example of what working along the contour lines of the landscape is. And here they're doing gardening with the same technique, and that allows the nutrients and the water to sink into the soil wherever you grow your vegetables. and it prevents from erosion as well. Like working on a slope, whenever we have a big rain, it just washes away everything. It's nothing new, and like people in China and in Southeast Asia in general have been using this dressing system for thousands of years, and it's been working for thousands of years. So modern agriculture has changed that and like doesn't work along the contour because it doesn't fit with the big machines. But it makes so much more sense to use these ancient techniques for respecting the land and growing things in a more appropriate way according to the laws of nature.
Growing plants with ancient techniques along the contours of the land. Very sad to see that modern agriculture has destroyed it very much because we need the big machines, and I am a sinner in that part, because when I was working in Denmark as a consultant, IT and logistics consultant, I actually recommended farmers to not optimize for contours. The thing that people optimize for in Denmark in modern agriculture is how many times the machines need to turn. So we used maps to see quite simple geometrics to see which way the tractor should go, so it would turn the fewest times. It's sad, but it's how modern stuff works right now. The sad thing about modern economics. Check out this hummus pirate. Swales, the magic technique of harvesting water and making the water available for the plants throughout the year. Whoa.
In the fields behind me, we're implementing a combination of orchard, food forest, and alley cropping corn systems over here. One of the first steps we're going to go in to do with this is to put in swales. About 600 meters of swales, 3 contoured lines of swales they put in behind me in the coming months. Those swales primarily are intended to sink in all the water that falls during the rainy season and benefit the land throughout the year. That water will penetrate the soil and be held down in the water table and be accessible to the plants throughout the year. This plant here is a pigeon pea. It's one of the permaculture all-stars in the tropical climate. We can eat the shoots off the plant, we can eat the seeds off the plant, and all the while it's fixing nitrogen.
I need pigeon pea.
In 1 teaspoon of good, healthy soil, there are over 1 billion bacteria, 900 feet of fungi, 50,000 protozoa, and several dozen nematodes.
It's feeding the plant, right? So we always have this idea that we need the nitrogen and the fertilizers to feed the plant to make them grow. But for millennia, Mother Nature has been feeding the plants and making everything on Earth grow without our input. And it's these soil microbes which do that.
The plants have a relationship with the soil microbes, which allows them to obtain all the nutrients that the plants need in the soil. The microbes help produce good soil structure. They cycle various nutrients such as nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus. They interact with each other at the root zone of the plant and provide all the nutrition the plant needs.
So we all know that the plant undergoes photosynthesis. Like the sun hits it, there's the chloroplast, it creates these sugars, and we all think that's what it uses to make itself grow. But really a plant is taking more than half of that, like 60% of all the energy that it grows, that it makes from the sun, and it's feeding it through these root exudates to the microorganisms in the soil. These little guys, these fungi, these bacteria, they can't photosynthesize, so they rely on the plant to get all the food that it needs, but there's a little trade going on here. So in exchange for the sugars that the plant is giving it, the soil microbes are providing the food that the plant needs to grow.
Bacteria in the soil is so important. If you don't cover your soil with a top mulch or whatever, you see a lot of people covering soil to make a process into the soil. In Denmark, they use it for making feed for the livestock, and they cover it with plastic. But if you have like a natural mulch or in a forest, there's always a top layer of something, and then the bacteria can grow inside, and that's very important. Bacteria is super important And that's why I'm focusing a lot on covering the soil so the bacteria can grow inside the soil and keep the moisture for them to grow. If you have bare land, it's just that all the bacteria will die because of the sun will just kill everything. Please cover up the soil. Bacteria! If we don't have bacteria, we will all die a very painful death.
Cassava is a pretty incredible plant in that it's so versatile in the tropics. It can grow in a desert situation, it can grow in a really wet situation. It's not the most nutritious food item, but it is a security plant. We look at it if there is some sort of emergency, if there's a huge drought, or if there's a hurricane that wipes out all the fruit crops off the trees, we can still dig up these giant roots of cassava and get the needed calories.
I really need to find some cassava. The safety. If everything is wiped out of by a storm, we still have cassava. So I need to find some cassava and plant it here so we will not starve in an emergency situation.
Gliricidia is a really great tropical legume in that you can plant it by cuttings. Very similar to the cassava cuttings back here. You can just chop it into little 1 foot lengths. And as long as you plant it the right way up, it will grow.
Gliricidia for a living fence to replace the bamboo fence we have here. Nice.
Another great one is Leucaena. Leucaena grows around here really commonly. Some of the Thai people consider it somewhat of a pest, but the multiple functions of Leucaena make it well worth planting it out here. It's a fodder for animals, it fixes nitrogen in the soil, it's a great chop and drop nitrogen fixing plant because you chop it during the rainy season, chop it up in little bits, put it around these fruit trees, and by just a few months later the sprouts are growing big again, and by the dry season it's putting up enough shade to keep these trees healthy and happy.
I actually think that we have Leucaena growing in between some of the bamboo fences.
This area is the jackfruit tree, a tree that produces more fruit in terms of kilos per year than any other fruit on the planet.
Jackfruit, the new king of fruits?
Varieties of eggplants. Here's the Thai-style eggplant, the little round version. And right here, a little closer, are the longer versions, a little bit closer to the Western style. These ones have gone beyond eating, beyond the best point for eating, but they can be still saved for seeds.
Steamed eggplant, so good with your rice. It makes almost eggplant steamed, really good eggplant steamed, and you just crush it with a bit of chili and you have a perfect sauce.
So here in the tropics, there's a few really good strategies that you can use in your garden. One would be mulch. A lot of the everything's kept in the biomass in the tropics, so we need to cover our soil with as much organic matter as you can, and that can be straw, or you can grow your own mulch, lemongrass or comfrey, throw anything onto the soil as long as it's covered.
I don't think that the importance of mulch can be mentioned enough times.
And a lot of weeds are doing the things that we want them to do. They're covering the soil and protecting it, which gives us the amazing plants. So covering the soil would be the first thing that you would do when you're trying to stop the weeds coming up. So that comes back to mulch again. That cuts down a lot of our weeding needs. And you can also plant weed barriers. So put things around the edges of your garden that can stop the weeds from coming in. That can be logs or bricks or rocks or anything. Or you can plant weed barriers, and that way you've got veg and things growing around the edge of your garden that you can harvest from as well. Things like comfrey, again, lemongrass, canna lilies, daylilies, edible flowers. Plant them around the edges of your garden and you're going to have extra things to harvest from and stop the weeds.
This is an important one. A lot of weeds are doing what we want them to do, covering the soil. A couple of comments on Seeds of Permaculture. It's a documentary about Pranya project, which is a permaculture project in northern Thailand. And let's see what's going on in Pranya.
One of the most important aspects to our ecological farm here is the making of compost, about improving the soil and constantly bringing more organic matter and more life into the soil. The compost production process is actually really easy and it's accessible to anyone. It doesn't take expensive parts, it doesn't take that much space. All you need are 3 simple ingredients. So using corn husk as our brown matter. Then we need green matter. You're looking for green leafy matter. The green color in the leaf indicates that there's still quite a bit of nitrogen left in it. If I was to leave this out in the sun, after a couple days it would turn brown, and that's indicating that the nitrogen has been lost into the atmosphere. So we want to cut it fresh, use it fresh in our compost pile. We just had a bunch of weeds around our farm, and this morning we went out and collected them up and put them in a big pile. And as we add it to the compost pile, we're going to chop it into little bits. We also have a bunch of food scraps from the kitchen that we're going to layer into the pile as well, and that also is considered part of our green component. For the nitrogen component of the compost pile, generally we use manure in the pile. You can get away with using the greens from legume plants because they're also high in nitrogen. But we're going to use, in our local area, there's lots of cows around, so we just went to some local farmers and got their manure from them. And so we're just using some manure out of their cow yards. So we'll layer this in along with the green and the brown, and add moisture and oxygen, and that'll make our compost pile. Another important component to our compost pile is an inoculum of microorganisms from the previous compost pile. 40% brown matter, 40% green matter, and 20% high nitrogen.
Compost, very important if you want to restore the soil. I was already scarred for life when I was younger, or actually for the recent years. My mother disliked compost because it's not nice in her garden, and it's like when your mother does something, it can like put an idea into your brain, and I think it can. Some of the ideas mothers have.
Your business so that it doesn't smell, it doesn't attract the flies. People come and go, and we have good food here, so they come quite often. And once it's full, we just put the lid on, leave it for 1 year, and then we open the little door on the side, and we've got black gold. And how this really helps to save like the big problems in the world is that by using no water at all, we don't have to like clean water to use to flush. At the same time, we get free fertilizer, and as many people, the more people actually come here, and the more fertilizer we have for our land. So we really like to have many people around. That way, it's plenty of fertilizer for our fruit trees. So if it's made properly, which this is a system that is actually very, very clean, there shouldn't be any fecal matter or any kind of pathogens by the end of the fermentation, and only like good mature compost. But here, because we are an education center, to make sure that like we don't spread any disease or anything, we never use this kind of compost in our veggie gardens. We always use it around the trees in the food forest. It's important to keep it quite dry. That's what really makes the difference. And a long-lasting process is like a long fermentation really helps to break down all anything that can be harmful for us.
A rocket toilet, a good project for volunteers here at Lake and Greg Vegan Camp. Currently, I prefer either to dig a hole in the land and do my business there, or use the toilet we have here, which is not a rocket toilet. It needs to be easy to maintain.
If you think about the inputs and outputs of having worms in a farm, and I'm not talking about the earthworms, I'm talking about these little guys here. These guys are called the red wrigglers. They are the ones that love to live in nice fresh vegetables. They'll eat all your leftover food and transform that into worm cast, which is a very nice strong fertilizer, very high in nitrogen. And also you get the worm juice, which you can just dilute with water and use as a fertilizer as well. The worms, they double their population within a few weeks. That will allow you to have some extra worms, and with these extra worms you can also feed them to your chickens, and that's going to be always a very nice treat for them. So there is no waste with having worms around in a farm.
In the dry season there were like zero worms here. Now there are tons of worms everywhere.
A reduction in costs to the family life, similarly to an increase in profits from enterprise. So what we're trying to do with permaculture systems here is both to reduce our costs, to reduce our fuel usage, to reduce the cost of all the implements and machinery that we need on site, to reduce the cost of labor, to reduce all our inputs like pesticides, fertilizers, those kind of things, reduce them down very low, while at the same time producing a product that's of higher quality. The organic and permaculture grown produce can get a much higher cost in the market. We can seek out niche markets, we can approach restaurants, we can approach hotels, we can approach CSA, community supported agriculture products, and see if our product can be sold through those avenues.
Reduce the cost of maintenance and increase the value of the product.
Concrete or cement has its place in natural building, but from permaculture point of view, we want to use it very mindfully and in the right places and the minimum possible. And it's very different working with adobe as opposed to concrete or cement, which is a destructive system, and in permaculture we're looking to move away from supporting destructive systems. The style that was chosen for this building is adobe. Adobe's been used for thousands of years. It's available to all, it's the earth underneath our feet. It's fun to do, and it can be done by anybody.
The earthen baking oven. Earthen ovens really bring community together. They bring people together. It connects us with our food source. So this oven is being built not only to give the students an introduction to natural building and a first-hand experience of working with the materials and the resources that are just right outside of our door, they're all around us, but also because we are so excited to be baking bread and making pizzas and roasting a turkey that we've raised on the farm here.
Making earthen ovens to be excited about roasting a chicken raised on the land. I'm just curious about people wanting to be sustainable and being excited about roasting another living being, which is not sustainable at all.
I'm starting with food. I just really like good produce, and so I started looking into how to grow your own food in a very efficient way. That's where I came across permaculture. Permaculture is pretty much everything, I would say. It's just about life. So I cannot just looking at having good food. I have to look at everything to be fulfilled in life. Permaculture also includes community, so that conquers the next part. I want to create something nice for everybody that everybody can benefit from, instead of trying to focus on a career that's just about me but not about anybody else. Where I'm gonna end up, I don't know, but that's the beauty of it, just being in the moment and just stop trying to control. Just work with everything around you. That's you cannot force anything. You can try to force things, but you're just gonna create the opposite.
Food is more than good produce. It's the whole package. So where does your food come from? You should check out the links down in the description. I will link to the original video. You should watch the whole video. It's very nice. Links to the website where you can learn more about the Pranya project and how you can volunteer there.